Hello, this is Storytelling on Orchard Street. We're in the podcast studios of P&T Knitwear. My first guest in episode 1 is Wayne Kral. Wayne is a New York City-based artist, a writer, musician, and host of First Floor Walk-Up bi-weekly reading series at P&T Knitwear. Wayne is going to read his first piece, and then we're going to talk a little bit.
Okay, this is called 2 through 5. Her mid-20s were like colored pencils that needed sharpened. Her 30s were like a welcome mat that was never in front of her door. Her 40s was when she checked learning to drive off her bucket list. She was changing a tire in Arizona when she was hit by a truck. Bad things happen when you leave the city.
I love that one. Are all your pieces really short?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, I also do short stories, but
Right.
I feel like when you're reading in front of people that don't know you and
Right.
you try to read a long piece, they're not going to follow it because they have no idea who you are. But if you read really short
Right.
and kind of gotcha
Sure.
pieces,
Right.
you get more people listening to
I
you.
hear you. Mine tend to be not as short as that, but on the shorter side.
Right.
So we first met right here. I came to see a friend of mine, Phil Damage, who was reading, well, I don't know, it was 2 months ago, whatever. And he said, he knows that I just started doing the readings, and I came to see him, and then I met you, and you asked me to do a feature here. So, number one, thanks, Phil, for introducing us, and number two, I really appreciate meeting you, and you included me in this in the First Floor Walk-Up bi-weekly reading series.
Right.
So you have a long history of organizing these type of events.
Right.
How far back does it go?
To 1995 was the first one. I was a bartender at a bar called The Levee, which is at First and First, back in 1994. And there was a fire in January of 95. Place closed, and I got a job bartending one night a week at a place called Mojo's at the other corner of Allen and Houston. And with 1 day a week, I wasn't making much money, and a friend of mine was in a writing group, and he said, why don't I bring in my people and we'll do a reading?
Okay.
And that's how it started.
All right, cool.
And it went from 1995 to 2015, but it moved from Mojo's to the telephone bar.
Okay.
And it was there the longest of the period.
Right.
Right.
So you've kind of been a fixture in the art, music, poetry scene in New York City for a pretty long time, right?
Right. I would say so. Yeah. I've had some art shows here, bartended, so you meet a lot of people through that,
Right.
And then doing a lot of different readings and doing a lot of open mics as well.
Right. So which one of those creative processes inform your writing the most? You probably had a wealth of things you could have written about as a bartender, but you also do art and music. I mean, does it all kind of come together, or is one more?
I would say the painting
Right.
is what leads everything. Everything follows that.
Okay.
And the writing is I'm inspired by surrealism and Dada.
Okay.
And so I would say that there's a nod to that, but I'm certainly not trying to write like that with these pieces.
Right. Were you born in the city?
No, I was
Okay.
born in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, okay. I don't know if we talked about this, but
Probably not.
the listeners wouldn't know anyway. So when did you come to New York City?
1989.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for coming here?
I had a good friend that I went to high school with who came to New York, and in 1983. In fact, I drove with her here
Okay.
when she moved up here from Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
And she came back to visit in '89 and said, "What are you still doing here?"
Oh.
And she said, "When I get back to New York, I'm going to get you a sublet," which
Okay.
she did, and it was on 2nd Street between C and D.
All right.
And in 1989, that was an edgy area.
Right. I remember very well.
Yeah.
Even before, I moved into Brooklyn in 1979.
Okay.
So, Yeah, the city was quite different.
Quite different.
And this area in particular, I mean, there's restaurants with $40 entrees here.
Yeah, I know.
There was bodegas and, you know.
Well, there's an
quick
apartment
drinks
that went for $12 million on my block.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, my block is, there's not much over there.
So, but you've been in the village since you moved here?
Yeah, I had that apartment that I for like 6 months, and then I got an apartment on East 4th between 2nd and Bowery.
Okay.
And, no, between 1st and 2nd. Lived there for 1 year, and then got the apartment I'm at now in 1991, so I've been there 31 years.
It's funny, in the mid-'80s, I worked for a record company, and I wound up meeting all these musicians from Ohio, most of them from Columbus. So it must have been an '80s thing.
Must have been.
Everybody moving from Ohio to New York City.
Yeah, must have been, yeah.
So painting is your first love, would you say?
Yeah, I would say.
But you were pretty involved in the music scene too, right?
I always wrote songs, but I never had the nerve to get in front of people and do it. And there used to be a guy that lived on my block that had been a drummer,
Okay.
Frank D'Amico. And
Name sounds familiar, but
yeah, he was around the area for a long time.
Right.
He's in upstate New York now.
okay.
But
What bands was he in?
he was in Our Mutt.
Okay.
It's a 70s band that played, the name is from the Marcel Duchamp, the fountain piece, that he signed it as Our Mutt. So that's what they were, you know, that was kind of punky sounding in the 70s. But we were talking one day on the street, and I told him I wrote songs, and we rehearsed, rented out a rehearsal space. He was on the drums, and I was on guitar, and then we started a band called Mighty Man.
Okay.
And we did that for, I don't know, a couple of years. And then I also love Buddy Holly.
Oh, God, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
To me, he's overlooked
Um,
in some ways, you know. I don't know if people in their 20s know who he is.
oh, probably not.
I mean, I know it's a long time ago, but
Yeah.
still, his music, you know, was so different from a lot of the other rockers, you know.
Yeah, it was from what was going on at that time.
And one thing, you know, like there were greats, obviously, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, but their music tended to sound like you heard one Chuck Berry song and the other one sounded pretty similar for the most part. But Buddy was really all over the place, you know.
Right. Yeah, he was. Yeah, and I did a band, and when at the time of his death, he lived in New York City. I don't know if you knew that. But there's an apartment building on 5th Avenue and 8th Street called the Brevoort.
Right.
And in 1958, it had just opened after, that had been a famous landmark building for a long time, the Brevoort Hotel.
Okay.
And they tore it down in the early 50s and built the complex that's over there now. And Buddy Holly and his new wife, Maria Elena, were some of the first tenants.
Oh.
And then in February of that, January is when he went on the winter tour.
Right.
And died in February 3rd, 1959. So
he was very prolific. I think he came here to record it, right? Or just move here?
He was recording in Clovis, New Mexico.
Oh, I see.
Norman Petty was his producer.
Right.
But that was part of Decca Records in New Brunswick and all that. So.
Would you like to read something else?
Sure. You know, a short piece or a longer piece?
Oh, you could do a longer one.
Okay.
You got plenty of time.
All right. I'll read it. I'll read a short story. Now people know me a little bit. So.
Yep.
All right. I'll read a short story. Okay. This is called Frontier of Obsession. He awoke to the single note of a piano hitting hard against the wood as if the padding had fallen off. It was a black key, a sharp, and it pounded intermittently. He tried to follow it with his breathing, but it left him breathless. Further away, he could hear a child talking, her feet shuffling through gravel, but it was faint. He lived in a second-floor studio that faced a street. He looked out the window to see if he could determine where the sound was coming from. He lived on a side street with little to no foot or car traffic. Today was no exception. He dressed quickly, feeling his pockets for his wallet and keys. He stepped into the hall, and to his relief, the sound was muffled. He closed the door and went down the steps. He walked onto his stoop. The noise was gone. He looked up and down the block and saw no one. It wasn't early. He noticed the garbage at the curb had not been collected overnight. He also noticed that it was only in front of his building. It was strange, he thought. It looked like someone had moved out. He saw what appeared to be several boxes of books and decided to take a look. Interesting, he thought. The same titles he had, even in Mylar protective covers. He looked in another box and saw kitchenware that matched his own. In another were all the pictures from his walls. He grabbed his keys and ran up the stoop. He was aware his hand was shaking and figured that was why the key didn't open the door on the first attempt. He tried again. They simply didn't work. Nothing was focused in his mind. He instinctively buzzed the upstairs neighbor and waited. Nothing. He tried another and another. No one was home. He looked back at the pile in front of his building and wanted to hide it. He put bags over the books and headed to the corner. He could see the avenue, but it looked different. It should have been a bank and a bodega, a slice of pizza and an optometrist, but it was one long building that stretched for the entire block. It had a single entrance in the middle and faced its twin across the street. The traffic flowed one way in their shadow. There were only cars, no cabs, no bikes, no buses, no people. He walked to the next corner, no traffic or people on the side street. He noticed the street sign, 53rd and 2nd. He looked back at his corner, 4th and 2nd. Where were the 29 streets in between? He walked to the next corner, and it was 34th and 2nd. He looked up the avenue, and every block mirrored the previous one. He walked back to his stuff and sat on the stoop. His phone was in his apartment. The police precinct that should have been on the next block wasn't. He looked across the street and saw a shop that hadn't been there yesterday. Rue Morgue Coffee. Under the Art Nouveau lettering was a logo of Poe's head going through a coffee grinder. Perfect, he thought, and crossed the street.
Oh, man, I love that.
Thank you.
It's definitely very New York. It's very trippy. What happened? Like, how did this all happen?
It's just something I've always kind of, when I walk through, down the street and I see garbage, I always kind of like, what if that was like my stuff? Is there something in there that, I don't know why, I just, walking around and you think.
Well, you see a lot of garbage in New York City.
And
sometimes you see some good stuff.
You know what? Yeah, most of my furniture I found on the streets.
And you mentioned books. So in your story, boxes of books.
Right.
You're an avid reader, book collector, and you worked in a bookstore.
Right. I pretty much now collect art books, and primarily from like about 1910 from about 1930 is the period that I study the most, which would be Dada, Surrealism, the Harlem Renaissance. Movies were just coming out. That interests me, that period.
Right.
So yeah, I collect.
Is there a reason, or it's just
it just fascinates me how. I mean, that was pretty much the beginning of modern art, as we know it today. I mean, modern art was before, expressionism and impressionism, the Fauve movements. There were things happening before, but for us, I would say modern art started.
Right, it was a very fertile period.
For America, with the Armory show in 1913. But yeah, I managed a mystery bookstore in the early 1990s. Right. And that was all we sold was mystery fiction. Right. And it was the best mystery bookstore in the world. Wow.
Do you miss it?
No, not anymore. I quit there and became a bartender. Right. And then I worked in publishing. I worked at Warner Books. I worked at Random House. I worked as an architect's assistant. He sent me to Pratt so I could learn how to do layouts and so.
Something tells me you're one of those people that I could talk to for a couple hours. You have a million stories. And this is storytelling on Orchard Street, as I said. So if you don't mind, maybe I can read one?
Sure.
Yeah. This one's called New York City, My Home, and it was kind of influenced by meeting all you guys. Linda's going to be on the next episode, Linda Kleinbub, and Philip is not here today, couldn't make it, but Philip Jambry and this whole crew I feel really fortunate to have met you and then now meeting all these people. Right. It's a very welcoming group of people, and it's given me a chance to go out and do this, and I'm grateful. So this is kind of a homage to you guys. I know I was there. the long passage of time makes it feel as though I wasn't. New York City and all its grimy, dirty, stinking self. Stepping over empty crack vials and used condoms as rats scurry by, looking in alleyways and abandoned storefronts for a potential threat to your life. We were young and just shrugged it all off as part of the zeitgeist. The city holding promise of art, music, and social experiences helped us look past the blight. Now the city seems sterile, a mostly unaffordable rich man's paradise. My fellow travelers of a time when equality seemed attainable write verses with images like graffiti on a subway car, drinking in dive bars until 4 a.m. When a cave-like graphic on a black subway wall can make you a pop star in a pop shop filled with your art. I'm not a young man anymore. I don't find adventure in the thrill of the unknown so much. I like my meal home cooked and plentiful, but I still dig the gritty chords of a song birthed in scorn, or the splatter of paint made in a frenetic arch of design. I cherish the memories of late night knishes and egg creams at Dave's before heading home from a night filled with youthful aplomb, when the waves of energy seemed endless. It was our time to grow up and be someone, hoping somehow we'd do more than survive.
Very nice.
Do you remember Dave's?
Oh yeah.
Canal and Broadway.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, so you've seen a lot of change. I've been here in the city since late '79. I came here to just go to college actually,
Oh, okay.
and got invited to share an apartment in South Slope. It wasn't called South Slope then; it was just the neighborhood that wasn't rich enough to be in Park Slope.
Right.
It was on the fringe. But the city was so different. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it was like some of it was in here. You know, it was gritty and dirty and grimy and
Right.
kind of dangerous. But there was more excitement, don't you think?
Yeah, there was a lot more opportunity. Things weren't so regulated. There could all of a sudden there'd be a gallery in a storefront that would last a couple weeks. Or, I mean, there used to be. Do you remember Cabaret Canum?
Sure.
Yeah, bands played in there.
Right.
Then it became Lucky Chang's.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, back in those days, they had no liquor license. They just, everything was illegal about it.
Right.
A lot of drugs in that place. It was crazy. But I'm not of the age that I would know about after hours places anymore.
Right.
But I'm sure all that still goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's an underbelly that we don't see because we're not seeking it.
Right.
It's just, it was a different time. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, time marches on, things change.
Right.
The city got richer. I mean, I don't know how people afford to live here. My wife and I, for 19 years, shared an apartment, and it was really cheap enough to save money and put a down payment on a house in also South Slope. I don't know if we'd be in the city anymore. It's gotten so crazy. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
And you could be an artist. There are artists living in East Village and other areas of the city. And I don't know how, if you're a young struggling artist, how you do it.
You wouldn't come here now. You would do it online.
Right.
But I went to San Francisco in 1974, and San Francisco and New York were kind of the same in the sense that there's nowhere to go. There's no extra land. You can only go up,
Right.
which makes everything more expensive to rent. But in the 70s, the last decade that you could do this was you could get an apartment for like $100 a month.
Right. It's crazy to think.
Yeah, down in this neighborhood.
Right.
And that same apartment now could be going for $4,000 a month.
Right.
It is crazy.
Well, for many reasons, the city kind of went downhill in the 60s. Mismanagement in 70s, it went bankrupt.
Right.
Yeah. So mismanagement, politics, all kinds of, civil rights movement, which was necessary, but there was a lot happening in the 60s, of course, and the 70s. And it was, when I moved here, it was pretty dirty. Subways were covered with graffiti, which was interesting to look at, but it was, you couldn't see out the windows. Nothing was air conditioned. And, I don't think the trains necessarily are great now, but back then you expected to be diverted and your train to be stuck in a tunnel.
Right. No, it was crazy.
Yeah. Oh, we lost our video. That's interesting. Well, we're still recording, so that's okay. We'll have audio, but oh, there it is.
Okay.
Okay, so just visually lost it.
We lost being able to see it.
To
but
see
we
it.
were probably
I hope it's still recording. This is my first time doing a podcast. This is the first episode of Storytelling on Orchard Street, and again, my guest is Wayne Kral. You don't have a book, do you? Do you have a published book?
I have a self-published book.
Right. Well,
And-
that's good.
yeah.
What's the name of it?
Kral.
Okay. Is it available?
No, it's not. A friend of mine did it for me.
Okay.
And showed me the layout and everything, and I approved it. I probably would have done something different.
Okay.
But it came together, and I was okay. And I probably printed less than 100 of them, but
Right.
they all sold.
Okay.
And then I just
Did
decided.
you keep any copies?
Well, of course.
For prosperity sake?
Yeah.
All right. Well, next time, at some point when I see you, you have to show it to me.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
Okay.
So there's none available for people listening, or
I might have 2 or 3 copies
Right,
left, but
right.
you know, and it wasn't cheap. It was
Right.
like where it's I think it's like 20 or 25 pages,
right,
and they're like illustration board.
Oh, cool.
It's thick,
right.
kind of like how because I do all my. This is a book of all collages,
Oh,
and
so artwork, not writing.
yeah, it's all art.
Do you ever think about putting a book out of your writing?
I've thought about it. Just haven't done it yet,
Right.
but I probably will.
All right. I hope so.
Yeah, I will.
You want to read something else?
Sure. Let's see.
By the way, I'm recording 3 episodes today, and I have 2 guests coming on the next 2 episodes that we're going to record. And your bio that you gave me was 1 sentence. Are you modest?
I don't know. I mean,
Because I feel like you probably could have given me a paragraph of all the things you've done.
I guess from having done readings for so long and advertising them and asking people to supply a bio,
Right.
and they go nuts.
Right.
And then I go, well, I only want it to be a 3 or 4 line bio,
Sure.
but then even that can be very long.
Right.
So I think that, I mean, people will, if you put that out there, people will read it.
Okay.
And I don't have to, I mean, nobody cares about all the other stuff that I've done
I care.
until
I do.
we talk and meet and stuff. So.
Okay. All right.
All right, so this is called My Block. I've been an eyesore on my block for the last week, even though I've lived here for the last 25 years. I asked what's up with that. They said, we've never seen you before. That's it.
Do you mind if I read something?
No, I mean, it's your show.
I know, but I want to be polite.
Yeah, okay.
I was taught by my parents to be a polite person. You know, they were Depression folks.
Right.
Yeah. Etiquette and politeness all counted. This one's called 5 Minutes, and so I wrote this after Saturday. We were both at an event, 100,000 Poets for Change, and it's all about like when you do these readings. It depends if you're featured, you might get 15 minutes, 10 minutes. In this case, it was a lot of people, so we all got 5 minutes, and that's where this came from. I've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes to tell my story, to open up and let you all inside my mind, life, and my past, to let my words resonate and connect. I step forward with lights in my eyes, I introduce my title, and I let it all out. Time speeds up and is equally still at the same time. I look around and I wonder, did I move you? Do you feel something? 5 minutes end, I say my thanks and get off the stage. The release of emotion from deep down lets me know that words rang true. In just 5 minutes, 5 minutes that is.
Nice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, again, I don't know if I'm repeating myself, I probably am, but poetry is new to me. I started writing 5 years ago. In the beginning, it was to get out of a stressful situation. I started putting thoughts down, and then I realized I can make stories out of some of those thoughts.
Right.
And then I started moving away from it always being about me and my inner workings, and started writing, hopefully in an empathetic way about other people's situations and stories, and I realized I liked it. I got asked to contribute to an online magazine, and then I decided to do a book, and I put the book out in May, and then I was like, well, now what do I do? And I said, well, maybe I'll go to some readings. Actually, I did one reading a couple years ago in 2020 in January or February, and it was right before the pandemic, and it went well, and I was asked to come back, and then the pandemic hit,
Right.
and that was the end of live things. That reading series, when they did Zoom, and I was like, that's not for me. I want to be in front of an audience. I was a musician for a long time. I like being on stage.
Right.
I like communicating with people and getting that reaction. So
Sure.
that's my drive. What's your drive to be doing this?
I mean, initially it was so I could make money.
Okay.
When I was bartending,
Right.
and, there was no one there. But then when that bar closed, my friend that was in the reading group, without even really talking about it, we were just like, well, we have to find another place to do this then.
Right.
And then we looked around the East Village and found the telephone bar. But I don't know. It's just it's nice to encourage people to write and to get their work out there and to do something.
Right.
So it's I've met a lot of interesting people from doing it, and I guess I enjoy it. Also, I was very nervous getting in front of people.
Right.
And I thought if I do this, I'll force myself to have to get used to doing this. I mean, I don't know if I would have done the music in front of people had I not initially done the reading series.
Okay.
It helped me get more comfortable.
Yeah, for me it's the other way around.
Right.
I was a drummer, and so I was always in the back.
Right.
They didn't give me a microphone because I always describe my singing voice as a frog watching somebody eating his legs for dinner. Occasionally I would try to sing, and I would always get vetoed. Please sit down.
Right.
Have a seat. I love playing the drums. I love being on stage. But now that I get to be in the front, it's my, art.
Right.
And it's very different. Writing and reading.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if this book that I read from is set up more for me, so I won't lose my spot, or I know when to pause, and it's you wouldn't want to take this as a way to transcribe my stuff, because there's like I said, there's a lot of notations for me.
So we have a couple of minutes left. We can go over, of course. There's no specific time limit, but we have a couple more episodes to record.
Is there a book here?
Yeah, good. I saw Pauline.
Linda
came together.
Linda's here too.
Oh, okay, good. You want to read one more?
Sure. Let's see. This is one that I read at the New Year's Day all-day poetry thing at New Eurekan.
Okay.
That I guess they probably still have. And Steve Cannon read it the same night that I did, which was kind of cool. Actually, I'm just going to read this short one because people like this. This is called Pigeons. Rats with wings, shit for brains, evolution's remorse. If you startle one, they don't fly, they run like a bowling ball on toothpicks. Pigeon pleasure or humiliation. I saw a pigeon on a third floor fire escape, shit on a pigeon on a second floor fire escape.
I love that one.
Thanks.
That's great. My wife loves pigeons. She actually feeds them. She's one of
really?
those weirdos. They're actually quite beautiful. A friend of mine is a photographer, a great photographer. When I say friend, somebody I knew in the 70s, and don't know that quite well, but he actually put a book out of pigeon photographs, and each one is different. They're quite beautiful, but they do shit a lot. I mean, they're living creatures. Anything last thoughts that you have?
No, I'm glad that you're doing this.
Thank
you for inviting me. I appreciate it. And
well, you had me do my first reading, and now you're on my first episode of Fields Fair. I'm trying to do this in the order of how I met people,
Oh, okay.
and how I'm getting my poetry career, if you want to call it a career. It's a passion. It came in just in time because we're not getting younger, we're getting older, and it's given me something to do in my glory years.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a lot easier than carrying a drum set. I was a DJ, a drummer, and a caterer, and everything I've ever done my whole life required packing a car. So now it's just carrying some pieces of paper or phone or something. So.
You should have played more places with backline.
Yeah,
All you had to bring was your cymbals.
Yeah, I did occasionally get lucky that way,
Right.
although not all of them had great backline,
Right.
but it made sense. Again, I want to thank my new friend, Wayne Kral, and I want to give a plug to the reading series he does right here outside the studio. We're in the studios of P&T Knitwear
Right.
bookstore. It's a great new bookstore on Orchard Street. So it's every other week for now.
Right.
When's the next one?
Next one is September 26th.
Okay. So I hope I get this up soon enough that I'm new to the technology, so I hope there's no glitches. But thanks so much. I'm going to find my theme song. And thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to close this episode out. And once again, I'm going to thank Wayne and say, well, goodbye, folks.
Thank you.